Beautiful snowy day. Beautiful snowstorm here in Pennsylvania. I want to watch this quick John Fetterman interview. John Fetterman is the prototype of what progressives need. The prototype to crack into the old blue collar tradition of progressive values, unions, all that stuff, supporting the working person. Um, um, strong statured man from, I think, southwestern Pennsylvania. Tells it like it is, very blunt, very pragmatic. He's been very progressive for a very long time. And I think he really is one of the keys. He's something that needs to be replicated and done over and over and over again to get political power in this part of the country for progressives. It's not, it's not lost hope. There is a chance we can do it. And I think he is the start to that. He's running for Senate, of course. Patrick Toomey is not running anymore. The same Patrick Toomey who is getting censured right now by the PA Republican Party because he dared to vote against Donald Trump in the impeachment. So now Pat Toomey is retiring. He's not running for anything ever again. Even if he did run, he would get decimated. But he's known he's been gone for a while now. But that's probably the only reason. The only reason Patrick Toomey voted against Trump is because Patrick Toomey knew he was going to be, going to be retiring. If he had another term, if he was going to run again, in 2022, Patrick Toomey, there's no way he votes against Donald Trump in that scenario.
John Fetterman.
What's up, Zane? No, it's not too. I mean, 25 degrees. I think it's pretty cold. But it depends what you mean by super cold and how long you have to be outside. If it's like 25 degrees and you only need to be outside for like a minute, then it's not that bad, but...
Who is the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania and has been since 2019 and is currently running for Senate. Pat Toomey is retiring and his seat will be available in 2022. How are you doing today, John?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm, as a progressive, I'm excited about your candidacy, and it's great to talk to you today, especially...
He's 6'8", and he has sort of the Western, not Western PA, but like the Pennsylvania, like, Rust Belt version of, like, Andrew Yang. So Andrew Yang doesn't wear a tie. Fetterman dresses like this everywhere.
Given what's going on in Texas and throughout the country, and the fact that you've signed a no fossil fuel money pledge on your candidacy for joining you. How are you doing today, John?
Okay, just so I can post this. John Fetterman, I'm going to be pushing for him really hard, considering I'm going to be voting for him. And like I was saying, he is the prototype for what progressives need in the Rust Belt. We need 500 million. We need so many John Fettermans, it's not even funny. We need normal people who understand the working people of these areas, who can speak their language, their dialect, like, who understand their culture, who, doesn't seem elitist. He dresses like this. He's 6'8". He's huge. He has tattoos. Like, he has this beard. He's not a traditional politician in the best way.
2019 and is currently running for Senate. Pat Toomey is retiring and his seat will be available in 2022. How are you doing today, John?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm, as a progressive, I'm excited about your candidacy, and it's great to talk to you today, especially given what's going on in Texas and throughout the country, and the fact that you've signed a no fossil fuel money pledge. So you're a great person to talk to about this. But I wanted to start off with a recent story about you and Governor Wolf and how you both decided to grant clemency to 13 people serving life in prison, including 2 men who committed a carjacking in 1980.
What's up, Daniel?
The woman died of a heart attack. Can you talk about that decision, why that's been so central to your tenure, and those kinds of moves as Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, great question. This was centered around 2 brothers from Philadelphia who made a really bad choice one day in 1980 to to carjack somebody. He was an older gentleman, and they approached him with a non-functional weapon and said, "We want your car." And they got in the car with him, and he began to develop some heart pains. And they said, "Well, take your medicine. We don't want the." And they dropped him off at a payphone. And then subsequently later, he died of a heart attack. So without a doubt, those men have culpability. They should not have done that. But at the end of the day, they were offered a plea deal of 10 years. If they plead to it, and their lawyer said, "Well, we can get a better deal. This isn't right." So they ended up getting convicted of second-degree murder, and they have spent 40 years in prison. And they were going to die in prison, but for my intervention to get them before to the governor's desk. And what's also remarkable about this story too is the victim's daughter said that if you don't let these men out, my family will never be able to heal. My family doesn't want this. These two men do not deserve to die in prison. They shouldn't have done what they did, but they had no point wanted to harm her father, and they recognize that. And it's so amazing when you look at 84% of the people serving life without parole in Philadelphia are Black. And these two brothers and others, there were many other on that list in that same situation. And
He was the mayor of a town that is 80% Black, I'm pretty sure, Braddock, in southwestern Pennsylvania. And he dealt with a lot of criminal justice issues. It's all about compassion. The 6'8", tough-looking, burly, guy that dresses like a steelworker or whatever. This guy coming in, talking about compassion, talking about improving our criminal justice system, talking about legalizing weed, talking about universal health care, green energy, and he doesn't like to call his policies progressive. When they ask him, "How do you feel about these radical policies?" he says, "I don't care about progressive policies." Sure, he calls himself progressive, as a general political label. But in talking to people, he just says these policies are common sense. These policies make moral sense, and they make economic sense, and they make sense for human rights. He doesn't skirt around talking about it in that way. He actually campaigns like many of us wanted Bernie Sanders to campaign. So he's like an improvement on the model in a sense.
The governor and I got them out, and that is the core philosophy for me, is the believing in second chances and redemption, and how we need to put a lot of the wrong injustices like second-degree murder in Pennsylvania, and we need to fix them.
Right.
And many Americans are sort of like bloodlust thirsty. They want revenge. They want to see people die. They want to see people suffer. If somebody commits a crime, oh boy, you got to go either to jail for life. You have to pay for it. We want you on public display if you commit like a crime or something. We don't want to fix why you commit the crime or anything, but we want to see you on display. It's so wild how this culture is founded on pure aggression and anger and no understanding on how systems affect people, on how circumstances affect people, and may lead people to have a higher crime rate or commit crime. And they don't think like, oh, why do all the poor people have a higher crime rate? I heard somebody talking about refugees moving into Pennsylvania. So they bring all the refugees in Pennsylvania, move them all into the same area. So these people come with nothing. They just move them into a poor area. So they bring in poor people, move them to an already poor area with no opportunities, and they blame this area's crime rate on the fact that they're not from America, on the fact that they're not accustomed to the culture and they don't speak perfect English. So they ignore ignore all the socioeconomic factors and just talk about stuff they can be bigots over, essentially.
I think that's an amazing story. And would you bring that kind of philosophy to your Senate campaign? How would you communicate that statewide and make it clear to your constituents why this is a just cause?
Sure, very much so. I mean, let me be clear. Like, I'm the first lieutenant governor in the history of Pennsylvania that's completely reimagined and revolutionized the pardons and commutation process here in Pennsylvania, because we want to make sure that we're getting the justice part right. If we could get rid of second-degree murder, whereas you have somebody who was sitting in a getaway car serving the same effective sentence of dying in prison as the Tree of Life shooter. Why wouldn't we want to do that? We need to remember that people age out of crime. We are in the forgiveness business with respects to commutations. We are not in the perpetual punishment business. And my commitment to criminal justice reform is stronger than anyone else's that could get into this race, because I've actually been doing it. And the work that the governor and I have done in these last several years has helped revolutionize the idea of a second chance here in Pennsylvania.
That's great. I think obviously Trump got a lot of headlines for granting clemency to people, but did nothing substantive.
That was all for show. He picked a couple high-profile cases where Trump can say, "Hey, look, I let the black guy go," and then he brought a bunch of black people to his speeches or whatever, like the RNC convention and stuff. Like, look, I saved a couple black people. I love the black people, and he did nothing to actually help, other than symbolic gestures.
On the issue, and it would be great to have another voice in the Senate who was pushing for that. So I wanted to turn to what's happening.
Oh, that story about John Fetterman pulling a shotgun on an unarmed black person, trying to compare him to Mayo P being. See, this is what happens though. They have no idea what it's like growing up in these communities. So John Fetterman, that story was he was walking with his son at night or something, and he lives in a city with a very, very high crime rate. He was the mayor of this city later. But he did hold a shotgun to an unarmed black man. He didn't do anything aggressive towards that person. He probably didn't even know they were black from what I've seen. He pointed a gun at somebody, protecting his son at night in a city with a very high crime rate. He understands. That probably makes him more likely to understand these dynamics of criminal justice issues, of what black people go through with the police. These situations make him more likely to do that. A bunch of privileged white liberals can critique it from the side if they really want to, but they don't understand what's going on in these communities. They don't understand what's actually happening. They give virtue signals towards it, but he's in there trying to actually get shit done, and they're gonna try to bog him down with that story. But yeah, I'm confident that he's a good enough politician that he can get across what was actually happening in that scenario, so he won't get smeared by it. But yeah, it's just one of those things. People just don't get it. Everybody wants to talk about things they aren't a part of, and they'll make it, like you said, make it about him being racist or something, which is so absurd.
Happening more concentratedly, I guess, in Texas right now, with the extreme weather that we're seeing, which scientists have said it's a result of climate change. As the Arctic heats, you're going to have a frequency and the intensity as well of storms like this.
Look up the story. Don't just hear he literally, as if he walked up to a black guy and held up a gun. He literally, it was, he didn't know anything about what was happening. He saw somebody and held a gun up and was with his 2-year-old son or some shit at night. Like I said, in a city with a really high crime rate.
You've signed a no fossil fuel money pledge.
He didn't see somebody and he was implicitly or explicitly oh, that person's black, that is now a threat to me. That's not how it went down. I could look up the actual story.
I wanted to open up that broadly. What is your take on what's happening in Texas, and then also just the fact that the right wing has seemingly coalesce behind a propaganda narrative about how this is the result of green energy, which is completely disconnected from facts. So what are your thoughts on what's happening nationally right now?
Sure. Well, it wasn't long ago before Texas was mocking and pointing at California and look at their, look at the troubles they're having with their power grid, and cue the massive failure of Texas's own power grid. I mean, they have their own power grid in Texas. So this is completely a homegrown situation in Texas. And the truth is, to your point, is divorced from reality. All the energy sources are down. It's not just green. The petroleum and natural gas have been frozen out too. So let's be very clear about that. This is a crisis of infrastructure. This speaks perfectly to the idea that we need to invest trillions in revolutionizing green energy, our infrastructure, and make sure.
Okay, so in 2013, when he was mayor, Mr. Fetterman used his shotgun to stop an unarmed black jogger and detain him, telling the police he has heard. So he heard gunshots and saw somebody running, and he stopped them with the gun and detained them. The police came, and the incident never escalated. The two people told the police they had heard several shots as well. So multiple gunshots. He stopped whoever was near. He was with his son. Um, an officer who patted down the man found no weapons. The officer noted that he was wearing running clothes and headphones, and he was released. I'm pretty sure at the same time. Fetterman was outside of his home with his 4-year-old son when he heard multiple gunshots, and he immediately made a series of split-second decisions. He saw somebody dressed in entirely in black, and in a face mask, running in the direction of an elementary school. Noting that the date in January 2013 was only a few weeks after the Sandy Hook shooting, and he reacted to that. He made a decision to stop the man from advancing until first responders could arrive and take care of the situation. I want to see what he said about it now, too.
Sure that it's done, that it preserves the sanctity of the union way of life. Think of all the union jobs for men and women that kind of a project of that kind of scope will
I'm not saying, like, definitely you could say what he did was wrong, but to say he's some type of, like, I don't know what you're gonna, like, comparing him to, like, I don't know, the bird watcher, that white bird watcher girl. By the way, that that white girl, the bird watcher that called, or not the bird watcher girl, but the girl that said the black bird watcher was attacking her. She took a racial sensitivity test and passed it. So she's set free now. No charges. Amazing, right? Amazing. We all know what the outcome of what she did right there could have been, with literally nothing prompting the situation. But the bird, you know, that girl that gets free, it's amazing.
And I'm not surprised that the Republicans are using this as an opportunity to bash green energy. I mean, you know, especially in Texas. I mean, look at how honest they were about voter fraud in this last election.
Meaning not at all. Yes.
Yeah. So this is an enormous opportunity and a wake-up call. One, climate change is real and it must be acted on rapidly. That we need to invest trillions in revamping our infrastructure with respects to our power grid. And two, me signing this pledge is consistent with the person I've always been.
Like, for example, if you grow up, there's a big difference between if you grow up in, say, a suburb with 95% white people and you see a black guy walking and you call the cops because you're not used to seeing black people in your area, or you bring a gun out like, hey, what are you doing? I don't know. How do you get those shoes? Why are you driving that car? That's a lot different. Growing up in that, you know, the suburb environment, never understanding anything about the actual world, and then being really racist and stopping a random black guy for literally no reason. There's a big difference between that and growing up in a 80% black city with one of the highest crime rates in Pennsylvania, experiencing violence growing up, and then when you're a mayor of that town that's 80% black, you are outside with your 4-year-old son when gunshots go off. There's a big difference between those two scenarios. And I can understand how the trauma and everything will affect people's decision making at those times, especially if he went through it and coped with it, and he went on to be mayor for another 2 terms after this incident happened. I think there's a big difference between these two kinds of people. He claims to not know the race or gender of the person he stopped. They were wearing a mask, all black hat, and all black jogging clothes. So I don't think it's fair to put him in the same category as literally the McCloskeys or something.
And this in every race where it was an available option to do. And I want to be clear, I have never, ever, nor will I ever take a single dime from the industry.
Yeah.
Did I mute this? Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally muted myself.
She muted
you're running
herself.
on small dollars, correct?
Correct. Our average campaign contribution, we've raised or approaching $2.2 million in a little about 5 weeks, and it's 100% grass powered. Over 70,000 individual donors with an average donation of under $30, and I'm so proud of that fact, because there's not a lot of $2,800 checks in there, because it speaks to the strength of the message, and it speaks to the strength of the movement, and it speaks to the integrity of which this election is going, because I can't think of anything more democratic than saying, hey, John, here's $25 because I believe in what you're running on. And I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah, I mean, you can credit the Bernie Sanders campaign for kind of normalizing that kind of campaign donation. You endorsed him in 2016. Speaking of this 2020 race that just happened, Joe Biden angered a lot of people on the left by refusing to ban fracking, and he continues to do so. Not just
banning fracking. Like, an instant ban on fracking literally is impossible. A ban on fracking by 2030 is impossible. The energy requirements. We see what's happening in Texas right now. Heating is by far the biggest issue. There's no way we can just ban fracking right now, and still be able to meet our energy supply needs. The thing we should be doing is preventing new things from being built, and doing everything we can to transition off of fossil fuels. We can't literally just like pull the plug 100% like right away. It literally doesn't work like that. But the issue is, like, Biden's plan to transition by 2050, that isn't good enough. And I don't even think he's dedicated to that. Like, if he was dedicated to that 100% and we can trust that, I would say, okay, this is a fine policy for somebody so centrist, for somebody so center right. But he's not dedicated to that. A better goal would be 2035. For a transitionary period. Realistically speaking, if everything went perfect, 2035. Right now, Joe Biden is freaking backpedaling on the $15 minimum wage. He said at his town hall that he is considering only going to 13. So we know what Joe Biden's already doing with his presidency. Amazing.
Just on the campaign trail, it wasn't just a campaign slogan. He seems to be committed to that as president. Many people speculated that was an effort to win over Pennsylvania. How does that square with your commitment not to take fossil fuel money and your belief that we should be kind of moving towards a massive amount of green energy infrastructure?
Great question. First of all, fracking, especially when it's done recklessly the way it can be, it is incredibly destructive to the environment. And that's one of the many reasons why I've never taken a dime from that industry, because no one can say, well, it's because he's bought and paid for by an industry. And that's just not true. The position here in Pennsylvania is more nuanced than that, where it's like right now, we have to acknowledge that we must transition away from these fossil fuels, and we must embrace green energy on a more sustained level. But we also must recognize that we have to honor and safeguard the union way of life for these workers that are currently here in Pennsylvania, and also the transition for those workers.
Also, another thing, he's talking about workers right now and transitions, but energy costs. A lot of people would be put into poverty right now if we went directly to some type of renewable energy, because as we have it right now, the current technology, it's a lot more expensive than fossil fuels. So energy costs, and this matters a lot in the Northeast, which has really bad winters. The energy costs are going to go up even more as we go to more green energy, and all that stuff. So that's something to consider. A lot more people are going to be in poverty in Pennsylvania, in New York, in all these areas, because energy will cost more as we grow more sustainable. And of course, we want fixes to that as well, but that sadly isn't how policy or politics works. So we need to work with what we sort of have and push for the ideal, but also understand that pragmatically oh my God, the policy making and policy implementation process is so freaking grueling. Oh my God, if people actually had to make policy and pass it, like for example, the forced to vote people, they would honor what Bernie Sanders does so much if you really understood how difficult this stuff is. Like, I barely have half of it, but it's wild.
Into these new sectors and new technologies where it can't be perceived as, well, good luck, learn how to code, put in a resume at Google. That's just not true or what's fair. So the reality on the ground is more nuanced than that. And Joe Biden understood that. But at the end of the day, Joe Biden carried Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania fundamentally believes that he will do the right thing and he will make the tough decisions when it's appropriate.
Debatable.
But he'll also split the difference and navigate a path that is also more nuanced and principled.
Yes.
What's up, Kylie, Coco, Super, Pat, James? I see Coco, James, and Kylie in like every chat. Every time I look at Destiny's stream, I see you guys.
I understand that. You've mentioned Union Way of Life a few times, and I read on your campaign website that you've cited that as well. Can you talk about more specifically how you would bolster unions if you were to win the race in 2022?
Unions.
As a progressive, think about unions are one of the most progressive inventions in the history of modern times. It's so simple, but it's so revolutionary to this idea that workers have rights, that workers deserve to share in the wealth that their work creates. I mean, that's revolutionary because now you could take it for granted. But back then, especially where I live, that wasn't a given. Men and women died to achieve that. So let's be clear about that. And I will never understand, whoever they are, why you would seek to destroy, diminish, or eliminate the union way of life. I mean, it singularly built our middle class. And,
But they don't understand that. And when they complain about companies putting jobs overseas, people don't understand that if workers had a ownership stake in the companies, the company wouldn't be able to just simply unilaterally like move their whole shit to another country. Unions have a lot of bargaining power in that too. Literally when unions started to go away, that's when we started having the Reaganomic, like neoliberal, whatever issues that we have now. That's when economic inequality soared. That's when the top 1%'s income skyrocketed. It's when unions left, when unions died. But people want to blame it on immigrants instead, which is so anti-fact. But as we know, people like Tucker Carlson have a lot of influence, and he was literally talking about windmills being the issue for Texas's energy supply right now. Did you see that? He blamed the Green New Deal. He's like, the Green New Deal is the reason Texas has no energy during the snowstorm, when in reality, only 7% of Texas's power comes from windmills. Over 80% comes from gas and oil. Like, he blatantly lies. There's no basis in reality. People talk about like free speech absolutism. Hell no. If I could deplatform Tucker Carlson today, 100% I would. Like that, like 100%. But yeah.
No one seems to care about how rich billionaires get or what the CEO pay is. But we bristle when we talk about a living wage or we talk about union rights and union protections. I'll never understand it. And whenever there is a vote, whenever that would come up, whether it's stand with the union way of life or against it, there's no choice. I would always stand with the union way of life, just like we do in Pennsylvania. The governor and I are the first and second line of defense because the Republicans were eager to take Pennsylvania right to work. And they're going to have to pry the pen out of my finger because it's never going to happen so long as the governor and I are on that watch.
So, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that dynamic. The Republican Party in your state, people might say it's extreme relative to the fact that, Pennsylvania can go either way in the presidential race. But to me, it's just emblematic of what the Republican Party's become nationally. I mean, they have obstructed the Democrats, and the fact that, you have a Democratic lieutenant governor, Democratic governor, and it's been a struggle ever since really the schism erupted, but also it was highlighted more nationally in the presidential election. Can you talk about the challenges you face with the Republican Party?
Yeah, like right now, Facebook said today they're going to crack down on climate disinformation. And I'm like, of course, I don't want corporations to have a right to control free speech or whatever, especially when these corporations are a monopoly. controlled. So it's like we have no choice but to use these places to communicate, all these media companies. But when all these people are so willing to blatantly lie about literally everything to a population that simply doesn't have the mental capacity to sort through all the lies, or like the time to sort through all the lies, working people who are like exhausted by the end of the day check on Facebook and they're like, wow, green energy is the reason the US is falling to communism. Like, at that point, I'm like, what is Facebook supposed to do? I mean, the consequence of this, Facebook is doing a good thing. You can make a slippery slope argument, but that's not really how this works at whatsoever. They literally just blatantly lie and people believe it. And it's scary, Totally different realities. The truth actually matters. Unpopular opinion.
Controlling the legislature in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, they've controlled it through a gerrymandering process that they instituted back in 2010. So it created a disproportionate advantage in that respect. But where they are now is they are the party of obstruction and lies. And this last cycle was never more true. These same people, whether it's our congressional delegation or whether it's the state senators and state reps, were all claiming that, most of them were claiming that it was rigged. This is crazy. Not my race. I was on the same ballot as Joe Biden, but the voters love me, but Joe Biden, it was rigged. It's just absurd and logically bankrupt. In fact, a couple of them were even at the Capitol Hill riots on January 6th. One of the most vocal ones, in fact, Doug Mastriano. So
Doug Mastriano, I hate him so much. He's the friendly fascist. I hate him so much. Holy crap. He is such a dangerous human being. Check out his Facebook. Google or go on Doug Mastriano's Facebook feed and go down a little bit. It's literally like Nazi propaganda. Oh my God, he was in the military. He starts live streams like every night called Fireside Chats where he prays. He like prays and has like church music in the background, and he tells people all things are gonna be okay because we aren't gonna let the evil people take our country over. Like, oh my goodness, this guy is a straight fascist. Jesus, dangerous. Oh, people like him are scary. I tell you what, and freaking Taylor Greene in Georgia, all these people are rising up. I don't think our country understands how dangerous this is for these radical groups to be getting real political power and real platforms.
It really comes down
like
to this.
Like 100% with free speech. We're not going to have free speech if these corporations don't cut down on disinformation and literal Nazis on their platforms. Like, we're not going to have it. These algorithms expand. They make the argument, like, and I used to make this argument, if you kick them off Facebook and Twitter and whatever, they're going to find a platform to communicate on. I don't care. They can go communicate on those platforms. The algorithms from Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, these algorithms give them so much contact to so many more people than they get on 4chan. They're not going to get 2 people on 4chan. The scope, the size of how many people they can reach using these websites is very dangerous. Billions of people, needs to be stopped somehow.
This fundamental truth that Republicans will gerrymander, Republicans will alter the Constitution, Republicans will...
Josh Shapiro is running for governor, sadly enough. Yeah, it is Gary Kylie. But yeah, I mean, Josh Shapiro, I don't like him, but it's okay.
Gerrymander, Republicans will alter the Constitution, Republicans will lie and spread misinformation when...
I can't say I don't like him. As a political person, I don't think he's the best. I don't think he is the best for governor. I don't think he's the best candidate for that position. I think he did a good job. But for governor, though, I just don't see him having the political, what's it called? The not savviness. The image of him isn't gonna sell to Pennsylvanians. Especially after Democrats have been beat up statewide. Because like lately, especially after this election with so many voters not trusting Democrats and hating Tom Wolf, the governor of Pennsylvania right now, for all the COVID restrictions. Oh no, we need a good Democrat to be running, a very strong one, not just a person who's next in line.
Republicans will lie and spread misinformation when the votes don't go their way. And that's
True.
what they're attempting to do by gerrymandering our state Supreme Court, which they had no problem with until we won in 2015. And now all of a sudden they're activist judges, and it's an outrage that more of them don't live in different parts of the state. So they are shameless, and it's tragic because, you know, gerrymandering is fundamentally anti-democratic. And that, by that,
No, I was talking about Shapiro. Fetterman's my favorite Pennsylvania politician.
mean to the American way of governance, the true will of the people. And the Republicans are democracy for me, but not for thee.
Two more questions. I wanted to ask you to expand on your stance on healthcare because I know you've been supportive of Medicare for All in the past. You talk about how healthcare is a human right on your campaign platform. What is your stance on healthcare? Are you supportive of universal health?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. You know, it really comes down to it's a fundamental human right. I challenge anybody to say that you are not going to need healthcare at some point in your life. I mean, it's no different than food or shelter or education. It's something that any civilized, certainly affluent society as ours should not recognize that. Now, what that looks like, you know, if there is a vote, I want to be clear, if there is a vote that would generate and create Medicare for all, I'm going to make that vote. If there is a vote to achieve it through another mechanism, you know, whatever way we can inculcate that into the fabric of our society, I'm here for. You know, I've always been outraged that the men and women that are making these laws and these decisions have government funded healthcare, and they seem to enjoy it. So,
oh yeah, Fetterman's wife is great.
To vote against the interests of healthcare for every American seems not only hypocritical, but deeply un-American and unfair. So that, you know, I am here to stand with the truth that healthcare is a fundamental human right.
Thank you. And lastly, because I know you have to go, I saw you referred to as a populist, and I think, you know, the right wing and Donald Trump have kind of thwarted that word, and it can be very broad. I don't even know if the right wing can be populist. That's my view. But I can see how somebody might refer to you as a populist. Do you embrace that label? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you in your tenure as lieutenant governor? And what would it mean to you as senator if you were to win?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny the way the Republicans try to say populist, the guy that sits on a solid gold toilet and spent, you know, tens of millions of dollars golfing at a country club. Only the Republicans could spin that narrative. But the truth is, like, I don't really focus on labels. You know, I focus on universal truths, like we spoke.
Oh yes. Oh yes. This is peak. This is peak. This is what I like. This is what I like. Oh yes. No labels. Universal truth.
That a living
Powerful.
wage, like healthcare is a basic
Powerful.
right. That marginalized communities and places need investment, and they deserve to be uplifted. I believe that LGBTQIA rights are fundamental. I mean, this idea that they don't deserve equal protection under the law is deeply un-American. Immigration, my wife's immigration story. You know, we need a compassionate immigration protocol that acknowledges that immigration makes America America, and ending this war on drugs. You know, legalizing marijuana as a party, like when South Dakota is to the right of our party, you know, the Democrats, you know, we need to just say, hey, maybe we need to be a little more proactive on these things. So there isn't one area where it might be labeled progressive or populist, but to me, these are the truths that I've been championing, the people, policies, and places for the last 20 years that I've been in Braddock.
Thank you so much, John Fetterman, Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania and candidate for United States Senate in 2022. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for our time.
Thank you.
What a beast. All right. I'm actually going to do a regular stream again tonight, maybe. I have class all the time. That's why I haven't been streaming, but thank you for the few people who have hung out this morning. To watch John Fetterman. Every morning, I'm going to come on at 9 a.m. to watch John Fetterman talk for 2 hours, all right? That'll be my new thing. Everybody have a good day. I shall do my class and learn the school stuff so I can be successful. And, yeah, okay. It's not even that it's college work isn't hard. It's like time consuming, you know? It's not exactly difficult. It just takes forever. Like the stuff I'm doing right now. On the flip. Snow. It's snowing outside. Yeah, it's all busy work. It's so dumb.